Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today we're plunging into a story that almost defies belief. We're talking about a simple $3 sponge, one quick glance, and boom, less than a minute later, it's the foundation of a brand now worth $500 million. A sponge. Makes you wonder, doesn't it, if you'd ever see something so, well, ordinary and just know instantly that it was destined for millions.
It's an extraordinary moment, absolutely. And it takes us right back to 2012, the set of Shark Tank. This is where Lori Greiner, celebrated as the queen of QVC, famous for having that Midas touch, made an investment that, well, at the time, seemed pretty audacious.
Right, audacious is a good word for
She
it.
put down $200,000 for a smiling yellow sponge, product named Scrub Daddy. And you fast forward 12 years, what happens? This humble cleaning tool becomes a $500 million brand. It's sold in, get this, over 257,000 retail stores globally, and it's pulling in something like $340 million in annual revenue as of 2024. Just incredible numbers. So the burning question, right? The real mystery we want to unpack in this deep dive today is this. What did Lori Greiner see in that split second? What did she perceive that, frankly, everyone else on that stage missed? And maybe even us watching at home. Was it just pure, raw instinct? Some kind of genius foresight? Or was it something, I don't know, deeper, like a really sophisticated emotional radar? Did she just feel what the market would want way before anyone else?
Precisely. And that's our mission here today. We want to unpack not just that specific iconic deal, but really dig into Lori Greiner's unique mindset. What's the underlying philosophy that drives her decisions? What about that subtle but, incredibly powerful emotional intelligence? How did that transform one brief encounter into one of Shark Tank's absolute biggest success stories? Exactly. And like always, we're taking the source material you've shared, the articles, the interviews, your notes, and we're diving deep. We want to get to the core lessons hidden inside this story. Think of it as giving you a shortcut to understanding this really unique approach to wealth, to innovation, and maybe most importantly, spotting those huge opportunities where others just see, well, a sponge. All right, let's get into it.
Okay.
Let's unpack this first, because it's a really fundamental difference in how she sees things. For most of us, right, when we think about money, we think about, saving it up. For security, maybe comfort, or just as a way to keep score.
A measure of success.
Yeah. But Lori Greiner, she views money completely differently. For her, it's not just the end goal. It's not the safety net. It's a tool, sure, but maybe even more than that. It's a test.
That's a really critical distinction. For Lori, money is, like you said, a test of how sharp your perception is. Can you spot that emerging opportunity? And maybe more importantly, how quickly and decisively are you willing to act, to actually deploy that capital? She seems to think money just sitting there in a bank account, it's basically useless, inert. It's real power. It's kinetic potential. That only gets unlocked when you put it into something the world hasn't quite caught on to yet. This isn't just, moving numbers around. It's almost a financial intuition, like a sixth sense she's honed over decades. Decades of watching, listening, interacting directly with real consumers.
And that brings us right to one of the most fascinating bits from the sources, this idea of the friction and her famous 3-second rule. So when Lori first saw Scrub Daddy on Shark Tank, it wasn't the cute smiley face that grabbed her first. Not really.
No, it was something more basic.
Exactly. More fundamental, almost tactile, right? The founder, Aaron Krause, he showed how the sponge totally changed texture with water temperature. Firm and cold water for tough scrubbing, soft and warm water for gentle cleaning. This unique quality, this friction as she calls it, made the product instantly intuitive. That was the key signal for her. You didn't need a manual, you just got it.
Precisely. That immediate, almost gut-level understanding, that was Lori's primary cue. While the other sharks, understandably, were getting caught up in the numbers, patents, margins, scalability, the usual stuff.
Standard business metrics.
Right. Lori was already doing a different kind of math in her head. Her focus wasn't just the balance sheet. It was on understanding human impulse. How quickly do people get something? How short are those attention spans? As you highlighted from the research, she put it so clearly. If a product makes sense in 3 seconds, people will buy it. If it takes 10, they're gone.
That quote just says so much about her perspective, doesn't it? While the other sharks were deep in the quantitative stuff, the spreadsheets, Lori was already thinking about human behavior, especially in that fast-paced world of TV shopping like QVC. She knew that product wasn't just clever, it was incredibly demonstrable. And in her world, demonstrable immediately means sellable. It makes you think. What others saw as maybe just a cute novelty, she instantly saw as a powerful vehicle, a vehicle for hitting the masses fast.
It really is a powerful distinction. Her approach there, it just highlights this financial intuition that's been like meticulously trained through years of her personally pitching products, talking directly to consumers, and really truly listening to what people actually respond to. So it wasn't just a blind gamble on a sponge, it was informed, almost a visceral recognition of potential. But here's where it gets interesting, that internal contradiction your source material points out. Lori is also known for being fiercely cautious.
Right. She says she doesn't invest emotionally, doesn't chase hype.
Exactly. So if that's her rule, how do we square that with this super quick, decisive $200,000 bet on, let's face it, a pretty simple sponge? Doesn't that kind of fly in the face of her own policy?
It definitely seems like it could. It looks like a contradiction on the surface.
It does, but the sources suggest there's this one core rule that explains her seeming spontaneity. She says, if I believe it solves a real problem, and I can explain it in one sentence, it's probably a hero, not a zero. That's the razor's edge she walks. It's this careful balance between logic, sure, but also that deep down gut feeling. Her speed isn't recklessness. It's more like a trained, almost automatic response when a signal clearly hits her core criteria.
So what does this mean for you listening right now? It's not really about just saying, oh, I'll trust my gut and hoping it works out. It's about what you've trained your gut to recognize. It's about having those deep criteria honed by experience and being able to process information against them almost instantly. It's about knowing why your gut is firing off that signal.
And there's apparently this powerful, silent fear driving her speed, which is really insightful. It's not the fear of losing money. That's what most investors worry about.
Sure, the bottom line.
No, for Lori, the deeper fear, the one that really motivates her, is missing the product that should have been hers because she hesitated. She gets that opportunities don't usually show up with trumpets and fanfare. They often just whisper. And if you're not tuned in, if you can't hear those whispers and act fast, well, someone else definitely will. So this reframes her decisiveness. It's less about being impulsive and more about this finely tuned readiness to grab that fleeting moment before it disappears.
Okay, so Lori Greiner's story isn't just about these big Shark Tank moments. That's important. But it's built on a career strategy she crafted meticulously, right from the start. She wasn't someone who waited around for doors to open. She literally built her own doors and then, crucially, sold the keys. It's a really impressive trajectory. Shows that long-term thinking from day one.
Absolutely. Way before the big TV deals, before the Queen of Invention title on QVC, Lori started with something really simple, almost, unglamorous.
Yeah, what was it?
A plastic jewelry organizer. That's it. Not some fancy tech, not a medical breakthrough. She designed it herself, went through the whole patent process, pitched it relentlessly. Pretty quickly, it was sitting on the shelves at JCPenney. And that first success, that hands-on experience, getting that first real win, it taught her something absolutely vital, something that really shaped her whole approach to building wealth.
What was that key lesson then?
She learned that real, lasting wealth doesn't come from chasing whatever's hot right now, the latest trend. Instead, it comes from systematically solving what's annoying, reliably, visibly, and at scale. Find those everyday frustrations people have and then give them a consistent, noticeable solution that's easy to get. So when Scrub Daddy appeared, she wasn't just seeing a sponge, she was instantly picturing mass distribution. She saw the problem it solved of, annoying cleaning tools and knew it could be tackled on a massive scale.
And that, you've pointed out, is such a key difference in her thinking. Most investors see a cool product and they ask, okay, how big can this get? What's the total addressable market?
The TAM analysis?
Yeah. But Lori, as your sources clearly show, she asks a different question altogether, a more strategic one. She asks, how fast can I put this in front of millions of eyes? That, you argue, is the absolute core of her strategy. It's not just investing in the product, it's strategically owning the pathway to the customer.
Precisely. And she had, let's not forget, spent years building and mastering her QVC empire. That's a huge platform. Millions of engaged viewers. And on QVC, you've got seconds, literally seconds, to make a sale. Scrub Daddy, with its visual pop, its instant aha function, it was basically tailor-made for that format. It looked great, you understood it immediately, and watching it work was weirdly satisfying.
And the results were just immediate, weren't they?
Undeniable. Within just months of hitting QVC, it sold out. Multiple times. This wasn't just luck, it was proof of concept, a blueprint for rapid scalable success right there.
And it definitely didn't stop with QVC. It was this methodical, almost like surgical expansion, channel by channel. Bed Bath & Beyond, then Walmart, Target, Amazon.
Each one building on the last.
Exactly. Creating this huge compounding effect. So by 2024, Scrub Daddy wasn't just some novelty sponge you found occasionally. It was everywhere. Over 257,000 retail locations worldwide, and an incredible 160 different product variations under that brand.
And what's really smart about Lori's approach here isn't just the scale itself, but the timing of the scale. She didn't just dump it everywhere at once. No, she carefully tested the waters, watched the consumer feedback closely, and then, only when the momentum was clearly building, then she struck full force strategically. This methodical yet decisive scaling. That's how you build lasting wealth, not just a temporary revenue spike. It's a true long game, measured not just in profit, but in securing those dominant, sticky market positions.
Which brings us to her ownership philosophy. And this, as you say, is another big mindset shift for a lot of us, especially compared to how many investors work. Unlike a lot of the other sharks, who diversify like crazy across tons of companies, Lori is super selective. She goes deep with just a few companies rather than spreading herself thin. That sounds almost counterintuitive for investing, doesn't it?
It really does. But her motivation isn't just about the financial return, it goes beyond that. It's about having genuine influence, which means she is not a passive investor. Far from it. She's in the product strategy meetings. She's shaping the packaging design for maximum shelf appeal. She personally trains the founders on how to sell, not just how to pitch, but how to really connect with customers. And that leads to the paradox the source highlights. Lori Greiner doesn't just buy into companies, she builds with them. It's a strategy built on deep trust, careful management, and it's all driven by that one big question she keeps asking. Can I make this product a household name?
And wow, with Scrub Daddy, the answer was just this massive, resounding yes, louder than anyone probably imagined. It's clear she isn't just taking winners. She's actively creating them, shaping them, putting her own philosophy right into their DNA.
And behind that powerful yes, behind that amazing ability to spot something and then grow it exponentially, lies what the source calls a quiet truth. Something Lori herself doesn't shout about. Building wealth isn't mainly about luck. It's about strategically positioning yourself where luck lands and having the power to say yes instantly when that moment hits. It's like the ultimate example of preparation meeting opportunity. She makes her own luck, you could say.
It's easy to look at Lori Greiner's success and just chalk it up to some kind of magical instinct she was born with. But what your sources reveal is that she doesn't just invest with instinct, she actually lives in instinct. Her success habits aren't the usual stuff, morning routines or productivity hacks. They revolve around this one single, almost obsessive question that guides everything she does. What will make someone say, I want this in the first 3 seconds?
That one obsession, it shapes everything. How she walks through a store, how she talks to a founder, everything. When Lori goes into a retail store, she's not just browsing, she's actively scanning every aisle, every display. It's like a live experiment for her. She's meticulously watching, what do people touch instinctively? What makes them pause, hesitate? What do they pick up? And then, maybe crucially, what do they put back down? She's noticing packaging, price points, and especially any sign of hesitation. Because that hesitation, that's where she finds huge insights into what people really want or what's missing.
That's fascinating because most people think sales is about persuasion, right? Convincing someone. But Lori seems to see it more like prediction. She's constantly training herself, maybe subconsciously, to feel what the customer is going to feel before they even feel it. It's like she's pre-loving their emotional reaction to a product, feeling the market's pulse directly.
Exactly. That's why when Aaron Krause demoed the Scrub Daddy on Shark Tank, Lori didn't just see a sponge changing. In her mind, she immediately pictured millions of moms gasping at how clever it was. She didn't just get the utility intellectually. She felt their future delight. And she knew instinctively if she felt that connection, that instant want, then the mass market would too. That's her core habit, her kind of secret behavior. Lori reverse engineers consumer emotion.
That's such a powerful idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just about analytics or market research data. It's this deep, almost empathetic dive into the consumer experience.
Yeah.
Feeling the market on a really human level. It's like an intuitive understanding of what clicks.
And it goes beyond just watching. This empathy gets baked right into her process through her commitment to personal testing. Before she invests in anything, Lori uses it herself, period. If it's a pillow, she'll sleep on it. If it's a makeup organizer, she'll actually use it with her own stuff. And yeah, if it's a sponge, she will scrub her own dishes with it until she knows, like, on a gut level, does the friction feel right? Does it actually work like it promises? Her philosophy here is really clear and powerful. If you haven't used it, you can't sell it. And if you can't sell it, you shouldn't own it. That's empathy turned into a mandatory step. Due diligence through lived experience.
That's a demanding standard. But here's the interesting part your sources bring up. Even with this deep emotional approach, her behavior isn't cold or detached. It's emotional, yes, but she channels it into this very structured, very effective process. And she listens differently, too. That's another subtle but really powerful habit. On Shark Tank, while others might jump in, interrupt, challenge, Lori often just pauses. She tilts her head a bit. She lets the silence hang there, lets it do some work, lets it draw more out of the founder, maybe reveal their real commitment level.
Yeah, that silence isn't passive at all. It's what the source calls active calibration. She's quietly gauging the founder's real belief, their conviction. Because for Lori, it's never just about the product. It's hugely about the person behind it, their passion, their commitment. She has this rule she repeats: I invest in people who are married to their product, not dating it, married. That really shows you what drives her. She wants to believe in the founder's unwavering, almost sacred commitment. And when she does believe, man, she will fight harder for them than anyone. She becomes their biggest champion.
That's such a unique dynamic. It creates this really interesting contradiction, doesn't it? Lori comes across as soft-spoken, very nurturing, empathetic even. But at the same time, everyone knows she's one of the most aggressive, most effective closers on Shark Tank. How does she balance those two things? They seem almost opposite.
It's her special duality, I think. She has this uncanny knack for comforting the founder, making them feel safe and understood, while simultaneously, silently calculating the market potential like a surgeon. She can give you that warm smile, that encouragement, while negotiating terms with, honestly, razor precision. The sources are clear. It's not just raw instinct winning her deals, it's the complex rituals and habits behind the instinct, the constant testing, the obsessive watching, the empathetic feeling, the endless refining of her perception. Because for Lori, success isn't magic. It's what the source cleverly calls emotional math. And she's been solving that equation for decades. It's almost second nature now.
All right, let's move beyond just the habits and look at Lori Greiner's broader life philosophy. How does that shape her decision-making? She's a huge believer in making fast decisions. Which, from the outside can look almost impulsive. But, and this is the key thing she always stresses, she insists they are not shallow decisions. Her core principle, the one she really lives by, is trust your gut, but only after you've trained it.
Right, and that's the central paradox of how she decides things. When you watch her on Shark Tank, listening intently, maybe tilting her head, thinking, and then bam. In what feels like minutes, she makes a huge investment, hundreds of thousands of dollars. It really does look spontaneous, almost like magic. But underneath that calm, seemingly easy surface, there's this powerful engine running, an engine of pattern recognition built over decades. Decades of repetition, learning, trying things out. Lori didn't just wake up with good instincts, she earned them, painstakingly, product by product, pitch by pitch, and failure by failure too, each one refining that internal compass.
She spent her whole career, really her whole life, constantly asking this fundamental question. What does it feel like right before a product succeeds? So when she finally pulls the trigger on a decision, it might look fast, but it's never truly impulsive. It's backed by something deeper than just logic, something she calls emotional certainty. It's almost like a knowing deep down, a conviction that goes beyond the spreadsheet.
And this is where she really diverges from a lot of positional investors. While others are busy analyzing market trends, digging through demographic data, predicting economic shifts, Lori is laser-focused on watching people. Other investors talk about product-market fit. Does the product meet a market need? But Lori operates on a different level. She talks about product emotion fit. And that subtle shift, it's incredibly powerful.
That's such a huge shift in perspective. It really is. It's not about the features or the specs or just the numbers. It's about how it makes someone feel. Wow. That's a powerful differentiator in any business, I think.
Absolutely. Because for her, a truly great product doesn't just solve a practical problem. It goes deeper than that. It solves a feeling. Maybe it's frustration. Maybe it's the inconvenience of a daily chore. Maybe it's even embarrassment. That emotional connection, she believes, is the absolute soul of business, as she puts it in that quote you found. Business isn't about numbers, it's about relief. If you can offer someone relief, you can build a business. If you can do it repeatedly, you can build an empire. It really speaks to that deep human need she consistently taps into.
And this philosophy, it doesn't just apply to products, it applies directly to the people she invests in too, the founders. She has this really intense rule for backing entrepreneurs, a rule that just screams commitment and dedication. If I believe you'll die before you quit, then I'll back you.
It sounds intense because it is intense. Lori has seen way too many part-time founders, people treating their startup like a side hustle. She doesn't just want passion, she demands conviction. The kind of deep, unshakable belief that, as she says, bleeds into sacrifice. And that conviction, it shapes every single yes she gives, and just as importantly, every no. Your sources mention a powerful example. She walked away from a deal she actually loved, believed in the product. Why? Because the founder hesitated just for a second when asked about leaving their full-time job to go all in.
Wow. So that decision wasn't about the numbers, the valuation, none of that. It was purely about trust. And it shows. Behind that famous smile, that nurturing persona, there's a core that is fiercely loyal, yes, but definitely never naive.
The contradiction is right there, isn't it? She cares deeply, connects emotionally, yet decides incredibly quickly. She's known for giving second chances in life, for being supportive, but she draws a really hard line in business commitment, especially with her own money on the line. And she seems to understand that a great decision isn't just about being right after the fact. It's fundamentally about choosing in line with your core values, even when it's hard, even when it might hurt short term.
And maybe her biggest fear isn't even making the wrong decision. It's, as she puts it, living with a right decision made too late. That's a powerful thought.
Precisely. And that's the deep reason for her famous speed. It's not recklessness, it's readiness, a constant state of being prepared. She knows every second she hesitates, every moment she waits. That's a moment someone else could grab that opportunity. Lori Greiner, simply put, didn't come this far to play catch-up. She's always aiming to be ahead, always listening for that next valuable whisper, ready to act on that trained gut.
When Lori Greiner speaks on Shark Tank, it's really fascinating just to watch the room dynamics. You can almost feel the energy shift, soften a bit. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't posture. She definitely doesn't try to dominate the space physically.
She doesn't need to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because Lori's power isn't loud or aggressive. It's magnetic. That's the word the sources use. She has this really unique kind of influence. It doesn't rely on force or, overpowering people. It relies on an almost uncanny emotional precision.
That's such a key insight into her style of influence. Let's look back at the Scrub Daddy negotiation again. It's a perfect case study for this. While Kevin O'Leary was hammering out royalty details and Mark Cuban was hesitant about retail scalability, Lori was watching something else entirely, something less tangible.
What was she watching?
She was watching Aaron Krause's eyes, how they lit up when he talked about his kids using the sponge, how he touched the product itself, not like it was just inventory, but like it was his invention, something beloved. She wasn't just hearing the pitch, she was seeing his deep connection to it.
And then, when it was her turn to speak, her pitch wasn't about her resume, her QVC power, her money. She didn't pitch it transactionally, like, here's what I can do for you.
Oh, not at all.
Instead, she pitched belief. She said something like, and this is so powerful, I can get this on QVC. I know exactly how to sell it. If you want someone who believes in you and knows how to move product, I'm your shark. It was like a promise based on a shared vision, not just a check.
That moment, it wasn't just business. It felt personal, almost like a strategic empathy play. The sources make it really clear. Aaron didn't pick Lori because she offered the most cash or had the biggest name recognition. He chose her because she truly saw him and said so out loud. That wasn't about control. It was about connection. Real, authentic connection, recognizing his passion.
This is just a masterclass in influence, isn't it? It's not about being the loudest or the most aggressive or even the richest person in the room. It's about deeply understanding what makes people tick, what they really need to hear and feel, and then delivering that with conviction and empathy. Influence through perception.
And this influence, it's not an accident. Lori actively cultivates it, deliberately, almost like a science. She reads people obsessively, noticing the tiny micro-expressions, the slight changes in voice tone, the little hesitations. She'll often subtly mirror founders, matching their body language or pace, just to build that subconscious trust, that feeling of being on the same wavelength. And strategically, she often waits to make her offer last. That gives her the advantage of strategic empathy. She can tailor her pitch based on everything she's just observed from the founder and the other sharks. It's about making the most relevant offer, not just the biggest one.
But the real genius, as your sources really highlight, is that Lori's power doesn't stop when the deal is signed. It continues, maybe even grows after the deal. She doesn't just write a check, she invests herself. She actively works to turn founders into symbols. She mentors them through massive growth, through media blitzes, even through crises. She finds the compelling story inside the product, and then she meticulously broadcasts that story to millions, making sure it hits home.
Right, think about Scrub Daddy again. It went viral, became a household name, not just because it was a cool sponge. A huge part of that was the narrative clarity Lori helped craft and push out at every single stage. That's what really sets her apart from many investors. They bring capital. Lori brings context. She brings that understanding of how a product fits into real life, how it should look, feel, be presented, how its unique story needs to be told to connect. And in today's world, with social media, creator economy, everything being so emotional, that ability to provide context, to understand a product's soul, that's absolutely priceless.
And let's not forget, Lori herself is a powerful brand. Her face alone sells products. Her name equals trust for millions of consumers. She's often pointed to as the shark people like the most, not always because she's the richest, but because she feels the most human, the most relatable, the most genuinely connected.
That's the long game of her influence. She doesn't just bet on products. She becomes the reason people believe in them. And there's that fascinating contradiction again. She's so warm, almost maternal, yet razor sharp in business. Connects emotionally, yet executes ruthlessly when needed. She wins softly, but she always wins. It's a testament to her unique power. Lori Greiner doesn't need to dominate the room. She just makes the room lean in, drawn by that unique mix of empathy and strategy. And that, right there, is real power.
Okay, so let's talk about what happens after the deal, after the big splash on Shark Tank, after that initial surge in sales. Most investors, once the deal's done, they celebrate, maybe pop some champagne, and then they're kind of on to the next thing. But Lori Greiner, according to your sources, she immediately starts obsessing over what comes next. Because, look, anyone can win when things are going great, right? And when the market's hot, easy. But only the truly strategic players know how to scale a business and actually thrive when chaos hits, when challenges pop up unexpectedly.
That's a huge distinction. Separates the good from the truly great investors. Scrub Daddy wasn't just a clever invention. It was a startup growing incredibly fast. And like any startup on that kind of trajectory, it hit roadblocks. Of course it did. Rising production costs, navigating insane global supply chain issues, dealing with retail delays, constantly fighting off copycat competitors.
The usual chaos of rapid growth.
Exactly. But what's remarkable, as the sources show, is that Lori had, in a way, already planned for this. Maybe not for those specific problems, but for the predictable pattern of problems that always comes with growth. Her philosophy seems clear. Success isn't built in the good times, it's revealed in the bad ones.
It's so easy just to see the massive success now, the hundreds of millions, and forget all the struggles they must have gone through. But you're saying Lori plans for the pattern of problems. That implies a really deep systemic way of thinking about risk.
A perfect example of this proactive resilience was in 2020. The pandemic hits, global logistics grind to a halt, shipping delays everywhere, inventory shortages, demand going totally haywire. Scrub Daddy faced the same nightmare as everyone else, but they didn't panic. And crucially, they didn't run out of stock like so many others did. Why? The source highlights it. Because Lori had already helped the team diversify production into domestic manufacturing years earlier. That one strategic move, made way before anyone dreamed of a global pandemic, turned out to be a total lifesaver.
Wow. So that wasn't just luck or good timing. That was actual strategic foresight being put into action years before.
Absolutely. Because they had those domestic capabilities ready to go, they could pivot much faster than rivals relying entirely on overseas production. They kept shelves stocked, kept orders flowing, while competitors were just stuck, unable to get their products. That wasn't luck. It was the direct result of crisis foresight. Deliberate planning. Lori gets it. If your business model only works in a perfect world, then it's already broken. So her approach is to meticulously build in resilience, or you could call it anti-fragility, into every deal. And maybe even more critically, she instills that long game thinking, that readiness for bumps in the road into the founders she backs.
And with Scrub Daddy, that long-term vision meant turning it from what could easily have been a one-hit wonder sponge into this comprehensive cleaning brand. By 2024, like you said, over 160 different products, each designed to fit together, tell a story, feel like part of one ecosystem. Sounds like a very deliberate, maybe even slow build.
It was deliberate. And crucially, that huge expansion wasn't rushed. It wasn't driven by ego or trying to make headlines. It was carefully sequenced based on feedback, not ego. That's a core part of Lori's long game. Don't scale for headlines, scale for habits. She's not chasing viral moments. She wants customers who buy once, then buy again, then again. Loyal, repeat customers. Building habits. That's not viral, that's sticky. And her belief, which her track record backs up, is that sticky wins over flashy every time. Builds real, enduring value.
So when those crisis moments inevitably hit, what does Lori actually do? How does she stay so calm? You mentioned she zooms out.
Yeah, she doesn't get sucked into the immediate fire drill, the short-term panic. She asks the bigger, longer-term questions. What does this brand really stand for 5 years from now? What will the customer truly need next year, not just next week? While others might be chasing quick fixes, Lori focuses on building robust, lasting systems. Things like logistics, product development pipelines, refining the media story. She doesn't panic, she pivots strategically, always with that long-term picture in mind. And the effect of her calmness. It's apparently contagious, according to the sources. Founders consistently say the same thing. When Lori says, "We'll be fine," you believe it. And then, they add, you become the kind of leader who makes it true. That's the legacy Lori Greiner is building. Not just successful products, but resilient leaders. Because the long game isn't just about surviving the bad times. It's about becoming truly anti-fragile, stronger, more adaptable with every challenge. And that's exactly what Scrub Daddy became. Not just a viral hit, but a durable, lasting business. A real blueprint for resilience. Hashtag outro.
Wow. What an incredible journey we've been on today. We followed this simple $3 sponge, Scrub Daddy, all the way to being in, over 250,000 stores, pulling in hundreds of millions a year. It's a truly staggering success story, however you slice it.
Yeah.
But as we've really dug into the numbers, they only tell part of the story.
And that's the crucial takeaway, isn't it? None of that, the scale, the revenue, none of that is the real story here. The real insight is Lori Greiner herself. It's about her looking at that smiling sponge and seeing something way, way deeper. She saw, what was it? Simplicity wrapped in delight. She saw a product that didn't need a manual, it just explained itself instantly. She saw a founder with not just a product, but a real vision, real passion. And maybe most importantly, she trusted that deep gut feeling that just whispered, "This feels right."
That one moment, one nod, one smile, one quick decision. It wasn't just luck, not at all. It was the powerful result of years of intense listening, meticulous watching, and just unwavering belief in her own highly trained intuition. So what's the big lesson here for you listening right now? Look, not everyone can be Lori Greiner overnight. Spotting a $500 million idea in 60 seconds is pretty rare. But you can absolutely train yourself to listen more closely.
You can learn to slow down just enough to really feel what the market is feeling, to connect empathetically with what people want, what frustrates them. You can train yourself to ask not just, will this sell, but the deeper question. Does this solve something real for people? Does it touch an actual emotional need? And maybe the hardest part, cultivating the courage and the readiness to act decisively when it counts, to trust the instinct you've earned through your own life, your own observations.
That's such a great point, because opportunity doesn't always show up with a big announcement, does it? Sometimes it's really subtle.
Sometimes it just smiles
Aye.
from the front of a sponge. So here's a challenge for you. What ideas, what people, what gut feelings have you maybe dismissed? Ignored because they seemed too simple, too strange, maybe just too small. Remember, Lori Greiner said yes to an ordinary sponge, not because it was fancy or technically groundbreaking, but because she trusted her training and ultimately she trusted her gut.
So ask yourself right now, what's your $3 sponge? What's that opportunity maybe right in front of you that you're almost seeing, but maybe not quite believing in yet? If this deep dive resonated with you today, gave you something useful, please share it. Share it with someone you respect, someone who might appreciate this perspective. And hey, if you feel like it, leave us a comment. Tell us about one decision you're really proud you made, or maybe one you wish you hadn't hesitated on.
And of course, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to The Deep Dive. Because around here, it's never just about the money. It's always about the mindset behind the millions.